The medical bay of the governor's palace gleamed with sterile perfection, its walls lined with equipment from a dozen different worlds. 20 of the galaxy's finest physicians stood in a semicircle around the bed where Kiro lay dying, their various appendages crossed in gestures of defeat. Elara pushed her cleaning cart past the ornate doorway, trying not to stare. She wasn't supposed to be on this level, but the head custodian had fallen ill, and someone needed to sanitize the upper corridors. The human girl kept her eyes down, her worn uniform marking her as beneath the notice of the distinguished doctors inside. His cellular structure continues to deteriorate, announced Dr. Vexthor, a Krillian whose 4 eyes blinked in sequence. I've never seen anything like it. The molecular bonds are simply unraveling. Governor Talvex stood by the window, his crystalline form refracting the light of 3 moons. His son had been the pride of the Nexus system, destined to unite the fractured colonies. Now Kiro's breathing came in shallow gasps, his iridescent skin fading to a dull gray. There must be something, the governor said, his voice resonating with harmonics of desperation. The zenith scanner showed no pathogens. The quantum analysis revealed no toxins. What are we missing? The Valtorian neurosurgeon stepped forward, her tentacles writhing apologetically. Governor, we've exhausted every diagnostic protocol known to the Galactic Medical Collective. If this were a known condition, we would have identified it by now. I'm sorry, but we must prepare for no. The word cut through the room like a blade. I will not accept that. Not when you represent the pinnacle of medical science from 20 different worlds. Elara had stopped pretending to clean. She stood just outside the doorway, her heart aching for the father's pain. She'd seen that same desperation in her own mother's eyes, years ago, when her little brother had fallen ill on Earth. The memory made her throat tight. She watched the doctors confer in hushed tones, watched them wave their scanners over Kiro's body again and again. They checked his neural pathways, his genetic markers, his energy signatures. They ran simulations on their quantum computers and consulted databases spanning 1,000,000 worlds, but none of them touched him. Elara found that strange. On Earth, doctors touched their patients. They felt for fever, checked pulses with their fingers, looked into eyes and ears without always relying on machines. Her mother had been a nurse before the colony ships left, and she'd taught Elara that sometimes the most important tool was a human hand. "Excuse me," Elara said quietly, and no one heard her. The doctors continued their debate, arguing about cellular decay rates and exotic matter interactions. "Excuse me," she said louder, "Doctor." Vexthor turned, all 4 eyes narrowing. "This is a restricted area. Custodial staff should not be his pillow," Elara interrupted, stepping into the room. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to continue. "When was the last time someone changed his pillow?" The doctors stared at her as if she'd spoken in an ancient, forgotten language. "What relevance could betting possibly have?" the Valtorian surgeon asked, her tone dismissive. "We're dealing with a cascade failure at the molecular level." But Elara was already moving toward the bed. She could see it now, the faint shimmer on the fabric, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. "May I?" she asked the governor. Talvek looked at his son's pale face, then at the human girl with her rough hands and cheap uniform. He had nothing left to lose. He nodded. Elara gently lifted Kiro's head and pulled away the pillow. The underside gleamed with a subtle, oily residue. She brought it to her nose and inhaled, then immediately pulled back, her eyes watering. "Solvathene," she said. "It's a cleaning chemical. Industrial grade. We use it on Earth for decontaminating equipment, but it's banned for use near living quarters because the fumes can cause cellular damage and prolonged exposure." Dr. Vexthor snatched the pillow, his scanner humming to life. His eyes widened in sequence. "By the stars. She's right. There are trace amounts of a volatile organic compound saturating the fabric. But our scans wouldn't have detected it because we were looking for biological or energy-based threats, not environmental contaminants." Solvathene breaks down organic bonds slowly. Elara continued, her voice gaining confidence. "The symptoms would look like spontaneous cellular decay. And because he's been breathing it in while sleeping, it would affect his whole system, not just localized areas." The room erupted into controlled chaos. Doctors rushed to remove all the bedding, to filter the air, to begin chelation therapy to remove the compound from Kiro's system. The Valtorian surgeon personally carried the governor's son to a clean room, while others analyzed every surface he'd been in contact with. Governor Talvek stood frozen, watching the human girl who had done what his galaxy's finest minds could not. "How did you know?" he asked softly. Alara looked down at her hands. "My brother died from chemical exposure when I was 12. The symptoms were similar. And none of your doctors actually touched him. They relied on their scanners, their databases, their technology. Sometimes the answer isn't in the data. Sometimes you just have to look." 3 days later, Hiro opened his eyes. The cellular decay had reversed, and the prognosis was full recovery. The 20 distinguished physicians had written extensive papers on the case, praising the importance of environmental screening in diagnostic protocols. But it was Alara whom the governor summoned to his son's bedside. "Thank you," Hiro said, his voice weak but clear, his skin regaining its iridescent shimmer. "They tell me you saved my life." "I just noticed what they missed," Alara said, uncomfortable with the attention. "No," Governor Talvek corrected, placing a crystalline hand on her shoulder. "You saw what they couldn't. Your people don't have our technology, our databases, our advanced medicine. But you have something we'd forgotten was valuable." He looked at the 20 doctors standing respectfully at the back of the room. "You have the wisdom to trust your own senses, to touch, to smell, to observe without the filter of machines." He turned to face the assembled physicians. "Let this human teach you what you've forgotten. Sometimes the most sophisticated answer isn't the right one. Sometimes you need to put down the scanner and use your hands." Alara left the palace that evening with a new position as a medical consultant and a full scholarship to the Galactic Medical Academy. But more than that, she carried with her the knowledge that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in matching the technology of the stars, that it was in remembering that sometimes the most powerful diagnostic tool in the universe was a pair of human eyes that knew how to see.